Once there was a farmer who had 3 daughters. They were washing clothes beside a river one day when a hoodie crow appeared near them. He said to the eldest, "Will you marry me?" She said she would not. Hoodies were ugly creatures. The next day they were at the river again, and the hoodie came to them a second time. He asked the next sister to marry him, but her answer was the same. She thought he was a horrible bird, and she wanted nothing to do with him. They must have had a lot of washing to do that summer, because they went a third day, and again here comes the hoodie. "Will you marry me?" he said to the youngest lassie. "Oh, yes," she said. "I think you're a beautiful bird." The very next day they were married. Then the hoodie said to his bride, "Would you rather that I was a hoodie by day and a man at night, or a man by day and a bird at night?" "I would rather that you were a man by day and a hoodie at night," she said. And after that he was a good-looking man by day, and soon they set off for the bridegroom's house with the bride's 2 sisters to keep her company. After 9 months they had a son, and on the night he was born they heard beautiful music. The music lulled them all to sleep, and when they awoke, the child was gone. The father was very sad, and what's more, he was afraid that he would be blamed for the child's disappearance. At the end of another 9 months they had another son. This time they set watch on the house, but when the music came again, no one could resist sleep, and this child was taken too. And again the husband was very sorrowful and feared that he would be blamed. A third child was born, but no matter how careful they were, this child was also taken from them, with the music lulling them to sleep. After that, they decided to leave that place and move to another house the hoodie had. They were to travel in a fine coach, and the hoodie said, "Make sure you don't forget anything." Well, they were only a bit down the road when the wife realized that she had forgotten one of her combs. "I forgot my comb!" she exclaimed, and as soon as the words were out, the coach withered away to an old stick, and the husband flew away as a hoodie crow. The wife sent her sisters home, for she wanted to try to follow her husband. This she did, but it was a sorrowful business. She would catch a glimpse of him atop a hill, but by the time she reached the place, he would be in the hollow on the other side. It went on like this all day until it was growing dark, and she was terribly tired. So when she saw a house with a light burning, she went to the door, feeling very lonely. There was a little boy playing beside the house, and something about him pulled at her heart. The woman of the house invited her in, saying that she knew of her trouble, and gave her a bed. She was so tired that she fell asleep immediately, but she was up with the dawn the next day and began searching again for her husband. She soon caught sight of him, but it was the same as the day before. He was always far away, and she couldn't get close to him. She followed him all day until she was utterly lost, and when night fell, she again found a house. The woman of the house let her in. There was a little boy playing on the floor, and the sight of him tugged at her, just like the boy she had seen the previous night. She slept, and again she left at first light, seeking the hoodie, but it was the same as the other days. When night fell, she came to a third house. The woman of the house invited her in, saying that she knew of her trouble, and that the hoodie had been there, but she just missed him. "Be clever," said the woman, "for this is the last night you will see your husband. Take care to stay awake, and when you see the hoodie come to you, grab hold of him." The poor girl was so tired that she fell asleep, try as she might to stay awake. When the hoodie came, he was sorry to find her sound asleep, but he dropped a ring into her right hand. This woke her, and she tried to catch hold of him, but she wasn't quick enough, and she was left holding just one precious feather. In the morning, she didn't know what to do. But the woman of the house said, "Your husband has gone over a hill of poison. There you cannot follow him unless you put horseshoes on your feet and on your hands. Now you must learn to be a smith and make horseshoes." The woman gave her some men's clothes and told her the way to the blacksmith. He took her as an apprentice, and she learned to make horseshoes. When she was able to make the shoes for her hands and feet, she left and used the shoes to cross the hill of poison. The same day that she crossed the hill of poison, she came to a place where her husband was to be married to the daughter of a rich man. There was also to be a horse race that day, but that was of no interest to her. So when the cook, who was making the wedding feast, asked her to stand in for him so he could go to the race, she agreed. And when the soup was served, she made sure to put the ring and the feather in her husband's portion. He found them, and he knew who had put them there. When it came time for the marriage ceremony, he said that he couldn't be married until he had thanked the cook in person. The cook was brought, but he said, "This isn't the cook who made the soup." So the girl was brought to him, and he said, "This woman is my wedded wife." Then the spells were broken, and they left the rich man and his daughter behind. They crossed the hill of poison, with the wife going a few steps in the horseshoes and then throwing them back to her husband, and so on. When they'd crossed the hill of poison, the husband took her to each of the 3 houses where she'd been before. These women were his sisters, and the children were the 3 sons who had disappeared. The sisters had been keeping them safe. And finally, they went home to their own house and were happy. I hope you enjoyed this story, strange as it is. If you're familiar with the stories I usually teach, you might have noticed some similarities. I'm thinking particularly of the story of Rhiannon, although a few others come into play as well. So before you go on to the next bit of the video, you might like to listen to the story once more and see if you can spot more of these parallels. If you'd like to delve a little deeper into the topics in my videos, you might enjoy taking one of my online classes. There's almost always something on offer. Some classes have tiered pay-what-you-can pricing, and there are usually a few scholarships available for the more expensive classes. To get notifications about classes and about scholarships when they're announced, you can go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter, or follow me on my Patreon page. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. Here we find the 3 sisters getting an offer of marriage. The 2 older ones refuse the hoodie on account of his ugliness. Only the youngest seems to sense his value, or perhaps it's that she's kinder. Maybe the most exact parallel to this is in the story of how Niall of the 9 hostages came to be king. He and his brothers go hunting. They need water, and each brother in turn finds a well guarded by a hideous hag. She says she'll give them water in return for a kiss. The first refuses. The second gives her a peck on the cheek, for which he gets a small reward. But Niall not only kisses the hag, he offers to make love to her. Immediately, she turns into a beautiful woman who reveals herself to be the sovereignty of Ireland, and this confirms Niall as the rightful king. Then there's the question of whether the bridegroom will be a crow by night and a man by day, or the other way round. If you think about the practicalities of this, the girl chose well. After all, the couple can make love during the day just as well as at night, but the enchanted husband gains the dignity of being a human again in human society. This question is also posed in another hag story. In Sir Gawain and the Loathly Lady, Gawain agrees to marry a hideous hag in an effort to help his cousin, King Arthur. On their wedding night, the hag turns into a beautiful woman. In the morning, she asks Gawain whether he prefers her to be a hag by day and a beautiful woman at night, or the other way around. But Gawain says that the choice is not his to make, and that she should choose what she prefers. By these words, the spell is removed, and she is forever beautiful. Gawain has chosen to honor the woman's right to choose her own destiny. What's interesting is that in the tale of the hoodie, the gender roles are reversed. In most stories, the sovereignty figure is a female, bestowing land, luck, or kingship on a prince or a farmer's son. Of course, there's one facet of this where the role of the female can't be reversed, and that's childbearing. Just like Rhiannon, the unnamed wife in this story bears children who disappear, as do Ternon's foals in Rhiannon's story. Scholars such as Patrick Ford even suggest that, like Ternon's foals, we should think of Rhiannon as probably having lost previous children to disappearance, before things come to a head, with Pryderi possibly being the 3rd child to be lost. And what about the wife's 2 sisters? They play no real part in the story, but maybe they're there to provide extra pairs of eyes to watch over the newborn children, which then makes the disappearance of the children that much more mysterious, just like the women who watch over Rhiannon after she gives birth. And while the sisters in this tale seem harmless, in Scottish tales of this kind, sisters and stepsisters are usually adversaries. In the tale of the hoodie, there's also emphasis on the enchanted father's fear of being blamed for the loss of the child. Now, one reason crows are traditionally disliked is that they will sometimes peck out the eyes of a dead or weak lamb. Of course, Rhiannon is falsely accused of having killed and eaten her lost son, but it's rare to see the male character in a story put in that position. Now we come to the curious episode of the coach ride and the forgotten comb. For some reason, the Hoodie explicitly tells his wife to make sure that she doesn't forget anything, yet she seems to have carelessly forgotten something she probably used every day. This seemingly innocent oversight results in disaster. The coach turns into an old piece of wood, and the enchanted husband, who brought wealth and happiness, is lost. There are interesting parallels here with all kinds of sovereignty tales, but particularly with the fairy bride stories of Wales, which I cover in another video. In these stories, a farmer weds a fairy woman who brings him wealth and good luck, but there's always some taboo placed on him, usually not to strike his wife with iron. Inevitably he does so, not with malice, but innocently or accidentally, and the iron is usually part of horse equipment, such as a bit or a stirrup. It seems that the taboo ends up being less about iron and more about horses. In the only exception I know of, the taboo still plays out while horses are being hitched to a wagon, even though the taboo didn't mention iron. So here we see the wife accidentally breaking what could be understood as her taboo, not to forget anything when they leave the house. And there they are in a horse-drawn coach when this happens. The story of the wife's pursuit of her husband in animal form and her visits to the houses where her own children are being fostered by his sisters has other parallels in Scottish folklore, but none I can think of in sovereignty tales. But the need for horseshoes, both again made of iron and associated with horses, is intriguing. When the wife comes to the place where her husband is to marry the rich man's daughter, there's to be a horse race. And although the horses and the action of the racing aren't part of this story, it's worth noting since both the stories of Rhiannon and Macha feature them racing a horse or being pursued on a horse. Speaking of Macha, you may know that there's a connection between her name and hooded crows. I'm not sure how much we should make of that, simply because there are some similar stories in Scotland in which the enchanted husband is not a hooded crow, he's a bull. And finally, the recovery of the children from the protective fosterers is another parallel with the story of Rhiannon, Pryderi, and Ternon. I can't tell you what all this means, but it's interesting to see a different perspective on stories we think we might have all figured out. Scottish folklore provides many such perspectives.